Throughout automotive history, there have been cars that redefined performance, luxury, and innovation, and then there were the ones that made absolutely no sense at all. Whether it was strange styling, pointless features, or engineering that defied logic, these bizarre creations left the world wondering, what were they thinking? Here are 9 of the most bizarre cars ever built, oddballs that broke every rule and paid the price for it.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 9. When Ford introduced the Fairmont in 1978, it was meant to represent a new generation of compact American cars. Built on the brand new Fox platform, the Fairmont was supposed to deliver lightweight, better fuel economy, and modern engineering after the gas crises of the 1970s. But when Ford decided to create a sportier version, the Fairmont Futura, the result was less futuristic and more marketing gimmick. Despite the sleek-sounding name and some superficial styling tweaks, it was still a plain, underpowered economy car wrapped in a suit it didn't earn. The 1978 Fairmont was the first Ford model built on the Fox platform, a structure that would later underpin cars like the Mustang, Thunderbird, and Lincoln Continental. The platform itself was actually a bright spot, lighter and more rigid than Ford's older chassis designs. However, the Fairmont never took advantage of this engineering potential. The Futura trim, introduced shortly after the base Fairmont, aimed to add style rather than substance. It featured a pseudo-aerodynamic roofline inspired by the Thunderbird of the 1950s, vinyl roof options and thick chrome trim, optional two-tone paint schemes, luxury interior touches like cloth seats and extra padding. Unfortunately, beneath that mildly sportier exterior, the Futura remained a basic commuter car with uninspiring mechanics. The 1978 Fairmont Futura's engine options told the real story, one of economy over excitement. 2.3-liter inline-4, 88 horsepower, the base engine barely adequate for a car this size. 3.3-liter inline-6, 85 to 90 horsepower, slightly smoother but not any faster. 4.9-liter, 302 cubic inches, V8, 130 horsepower, optional but detuned for emissions. Even with the V8, the Futura was far from sporty. The car's 0 to 60 miles per hour time ranged from 12 to 16 seconds depending on engine choice, making Futura sound more like a cruel joke than a promise. The 4-cylinder struggled on the highway, and the 6-cylinder offered little improvement. Meanwhile, the V8 added weight and drank fuel without providing the kind of performance enthusiasts expected from a sporty trim. The interior of the 1978 Futura tried to appear upscale but felt budget-built in every way. Hard plastics dominated the dash and door panels. Optional bucket seats were stiff and unsupportive. Thin carpeting and minimal insulation made for a noisy cabin. Basic gauges and cheap switchgear betrayed its economy roots. The only futuristic feature might have been the rectangular speedometer, which looked modern at the time, but even that quickly aged into obsolescence. Ford's advertising hyped the Fairmont Futura as the shape of tomorrow, emphasizing its fuel economy, affordability, and modern construction. But buyers quickly realized it was just another boxy, slow, and uninspiring compact in a sea of similar sedans. While it sold reasonably well, thanks to its low price and good fuel mileage, the Futura nameplate didn't inspire passion. It became a transportation appliance, competent but utterly devoid of charisma. The 1978 Fairmont Futura perfectly captures the late 1970s malaise era in American car design. Bold names, bland execution. Marketing over innovation. Economy over excitement. Ironically, the Fox platform would later redeem itself when Ford used it to create the 1979 Mustang, a car that actually lived up to its potential. But the Fairmont Futura remained a forgettable prelude to better cars, a reminder that not every new generation is truly new. Quick specs: 1978 Ford Fairmont Futura. Platform: Fox. Weight: 2,800 to 3,000 pounds. Engines: 2.3-liter i4, 88 horsepower. 3.3-liter i6, 90 horsepower. 4.9-liter V8, 130 horsepower. Transmission: 3-speed manual or automatic. 0 to 60 miles per hour, 12 to 16 seconds. Top speed, somewhere around 100 miles per hour. Price, 1978, $4,000 to $5,000. Production, 250,000 Fairmonts total, Futura included. The 1978 Ford Fairmont Futura is remembered not for its innovation, but for its ironic name and forgettable character. It promised the future, yet delivered the past. A car that looked the part of modern progress, but drove like yesterday's compromise. It was, in essence, a futuristic car built for people who didn't actually care about the future, just about getting to work cheaply. Number 8. When Chevrolet unveiled the Citation in 1979 for the 1980 model year, it was hailed as a revolution. This was General Motors' first front-wheel drive compact designed to replace aging rear-drive models like the Nova. It was lighter, smaller, more efficient, and aimed to prove that Detroit could finally compete with the increasingly popular imports from Japan. The X11 variant was the performance version, GM's attempt to make the compact FWD platform sporty and exciting. On paper, it sounded promising. In reality, it became one of the most notorious failures in GM history, known for poor build quality, dangerous brake issues, and rapid corrosion. The Citation was built on GM's new X-Body platform, which also underpinned the Buick Skylark, Oldsmobile Omega, and Pontiac Phoenix. This platform marked a radical departure from GM's traditional engineering. Front-wheel drive for improved interior space and fuel economy, transverse-mounted engines, unitized body construction for lower weight. It was meant to represent GM's modern, efficient future. Unfortunately, cost-cutting, rushed production, and inadequate testing led to severe mechanical and safety problems right from the start. The 1980 Citation X11 was fitted with a slightly sportier setup than the standard Citation. Engines: 2.5-liter Iron Duke inline-4, 90 horsepower. 2.8-liter V6, 115 horsepower, standard in the X11. Transmission: 4-speed manual or 3-speed automatic. Curb weight, approximately 2,600 pounds. GM claimed the X11 had European handling, touting its sport-tuned suspension, rear anti-roll bar, and quicker steering. But reviewers found it clumsy and unpredictable, with understeer so extreme that it felt unsafe at higher speeds. The front-wheel drive layout was new to GM engineers, and early models suffered from torque steer, wheel hop, and uneven braking behavior. In marketing, Chevrolet promised that the Citation X11 was fun to drive, like a sports sedan. In reality, steering feel was numb and vague. Suspension tuning varied wildly due to inconsistent assembly. Brakes faded quickly and sometimes locked up unexpectedly, leading to early recalls. Acceleration, 0 to 60, in about 9 to 10 seconds, was decent for the time, but meaningless when the car handled like a refrigerator on roller skates. Magazines initially praised it. Car and Driver even awarded the Citation Car of the Year in 1980, but those accolades didn't last. Within a year, owners reported massive reliability problems and rust forming before the second winter. The Citation quickly became infamous for catastrophic quality control. Rust. Wheel wells, door sills, and subframes rusted through in as little as 2 years, especially in northern climates. Brakes. Early models suffered from front brake lockup, causing spinouts and crashes. GM issued multiple recalls. Transmission failures. The 3-speed automatic often failed before 50,000 miles. Electrical problems. Gauges, lighting, and ignition systems were prone to sudden failure. Interior materials. Cheap plastics cracked and warped easily under heat or sun exposure. By 1981, the Citation's reputation had collapsed and dealers struggled to convince customers that newer versions were improved. Inside, the X11 offered slightly sportier trimmings, unique steering wheel and dashboard badges, optional bucket seats and a tachometer, rally stripes and two-tone paint on the exterior. But it was still basic and cheaply finished. Hard plastics, rattling panels, and uncomfortable seating made the cabin feel more like an economy car than a performance machine. At first, the Citation was a massive success. Over 800,000 units sold in its first year. But that enthusiasm quickly turned to disaster as reliability complaints poured in. GM's poor quality control eroded customer trust and sales plummeted by the early 1980s. By the time the Citation X11 was discontinued in 1985, the model name had become synonymous with recalls, rust, and regret. The 1980 Chevrolet Citation X11 is now remembered as one of the most disappointing cars in GM history, a case study in how rushed innovation and poor execution can destroy even the best intentions. It represented everything wrong with Detroit's mindset at the dawn of the 1980s. Ambitious promises with little testing, new technology built with old habits, cost-cutting that led to engineering disaster. Today, it's rare to find a Citation X11 that hasn't disintegrated, literally. Those that survive serve as ironic relics of the era when GM tried to modernize but ended up embarrassing itself. Quick specs: 1980 Chevrolet Citation X11. Drive layout: front-wheel drive. Engines: 2.5-liter i4 90 horsepower, 2.8-liter V6 115 horsepower. Transmission: 4-speed manual or 3-speed automatic. Weight: approximately 2,600 pounds. Price 1980, approximately $5,500 to $6,000. Production: all Citations 1980, approximately 811,000 units. The 1980 Chevrolet Citation X11 was supposed to be a symbol of GM's technological rebirth: front-wheel drive, sporty handling, and modern efficiency. Instead, it became a punchline, earning a place in history as a car that rusted, rattled, and disappointed an entire generation of loyal GM customers. It was, in every sense, the future, but one you couldn't wait to escape. Number 7. By 1981, Oldsmobile's Cutlass nameplate was a household favorite, sleek, comfortable, and one of America's best-selling midsize cars. But in a strange twist of engineering and corporate decision-making, GM decided that the Cutlass should be offered with a diesel engine, a move that turned a popular car into one of the biggest embarrassments in automotive history. The result was the Oldsmobile 350 Diesel V8, an engine so notoriously bad that it became shorthand for slow, smoky, and unreliable. In the late 1970s, the oil crisis sent shockwaves through Detroit. Gasoline prices were rising, fuel economy became a selling point, and Americans briefly flirted with the idea of diesel cars, inspired by the long-lasting, efficient Mercedes-Benz diesels that were popular at the time. GM wanted in on that market, and quickly. But rather than design a true diesel engine from scratch, as Mercedes had done, Oldsmobile converted its existing 350 cubic inch gasoline V8 to run on diesel fuel. It was an engineering shortcut that would haunt the company for years. The Oldsmobile 5.7-liter, 350 cubic inch diesel V8 looked good on paper. Displacement: 350 cubic inches, 5.7 liter. Power output: 120 horsepower. Torque: 220 pound-feet. Fuel economy: 25 to 30 miles per gallon highway, excellent for a full-size car at the time. Unfortunately, it was plagued with fundamental design flaws from the start. Weak head bolts. The original gasoline block wasn't strong enough for diesel compression ratios, 22:1, leading to blown head gaskets and warped heads. Poor fuel injection system. GM sourced unreliable injection pumps that failed prematurely. Contaminated diesel fuel. American diesel fuel at the time was dirty and full of water, a death sentence for an already fragile design. Hard starting and excessive smoke. Cold starts were agonizing and clouds of black soot were a common sight. Owners often joked that you could see an Oldsmobile diesel before you could hear it, thanks to the thick smoke trailing behind it. Even when the engine did work, the 1981 Oldsmobile diesel Cutlass was painfully slow. 0 to 60 miles per gallon, around 20 seconds. Top speed, barely 85 miles per gallon. Transmission, 3-speed automatic. Acceleration was so sluggish that merging onto highways required planning, patience, and prayer. Meanwhile, the heavy diesel engine ruined front-end handling and made the car feel nose-heavy and clumsy. The problems began almost immediately after purchase. Engine seized or blew head gaskets within 30,000 to 40,000 miles. Fuel systems clogged from minimal contamination. Cold weather starting failures were common, even with block heaters. GM issued multiple recalls, but the damage to reputation was permanent. To make matters worse, many owners, unfamiliar with diesel maintenance, skipped essential fuel filter changes or accidentally filled their tanks with gasoline, compounding the chaos. Word spread fast, and soon the Oldsmobile diesel became a national joke. The 1981 Cutlass diesel, along with its GM siblings, Chevrolet, Buick, Pontiac versions, triggered a massive wave of warranty claims and lawsuits. GM replaced thousands of engines under warranty, costing millions. Diesel sales across all GM brands plummeted by the mid-1980s. The engine's failure poisoned public opinion toward diesel passenger cars in America for decades. Even though later diesel engines, like the improved 4.3-liter diesel, were somewhat better, no one trusted them anymore. The damage was done. Ironically, the Cutlass itself, apart from the engine, was one of GM's better mid-size designs. Plush seats, smooth ride, and clean styling. Optional amenities like air conditioning, cruise control, and stereo systems. But none of that mattered when your car refused to start on a cold morning or blew its head gasket in traffic. The 1981 Oldsmobile diesel Cutlass wasn't just a bad car, it was a cultural turning point. It made Americans associate diesel with noise and smoke, terrible reliability, embarrassing performance. It single-handedly set back diesel passenger car development in the U.S. by decades, and even today, the stigma lingers. Automotive historians often cite it as one of GM's top 5 engineering blunders of all time, right alongside the Vega's aluminum engine and the X-Body Citation's brake failures. Quick specs: 1981 Oldsmobile diesel. Engine: 5.7-liter, 350 cubic inch diesel V8. Power: 120 horsepower. Torque: 220 pound-feet. Transmission: 3-speed automatic. 0 to 60 miles per gallon, around 20 seconds. Top speed: around 85 miles per gallon. Weight: around 3,600 pounds. Price: 1981, $7,500 to $8,000. Fuel economy: 25 to 30 miles per gallon highway. Production: limited, few thousand diesel units among hundreds of thousands of Cutlasses. The 1981 Oldsmobile diesel Cutlass was a classic case of corporate haste and misplaced optimism. GM wanted to compete with European diesels, but refused to invest the time or money to do it right. The result was a car that smoked, stalled, and soured an entire nation's opinion of diesel engines. It was marketed as a technological leap forward, but it became a mechanical cautionary tale, remembered today as the engine that died of bad design. Number 6. When Chevrolet introduced the Vega in 1970, it was meant to be a revolution, an all-American answer to the flood of small imports like the VW Beetle, Toyota Corolla, and Datsun 510. It looked sharp and modern, and GM bragged that it would be the compact car of the future. But very quickly, that dream unraveled. The Vega became infamous for terrible quality control, rust that formed within months, and an engine that burned oil faster than gas. The car's aluminum 2.3-liter four-cylinder engine was innovative on paper but disastrously unreliable in real life. Cylinder walls would warp, oil would leak, and many engines needed replacement before reaching 40,000 miles. By 1975, the Vega name was already toxic, and that's when Chevrolet decided to create a Panel Express version. The 1975 Vega Panel Express was a stripped-down version of the Vega station wagon, aimed at tradesmen, couriers, and small delivery companies. Instead of rear windows, it had metal panels, giving it a cargo van appearance. The idea was to offer an affordable, fuel-efficient light delivery vehicle during the energy crisis years. It was marketed as practical and thrifty, a car for florists, electricians, and urban couriers who didn't need a full-size van. Unfortunately, what Chevrolet delivered was anything but practical. The first major issue was space. The Vega Panel Express offered only about 50 cubic feet of cargo capacity, barely more than a compact hatchback. Worse, the loading area was awkward, with a high rear lip and narrow opening that made it difficult to fit standard boxes or equipment. Then came the power problem. The base 2.3-liter aluminum engine produced about 70 horsepower, and the car's 3-speed manual transmission was geared for economy, not hauling. Even with light cargo, the Vega struggled on hills and highways. Loading it up made it slower than a lawn tractor. And then the build quality. Like every Vega, the Panel Express was cursed with thin sheet metal, poor rust-proofing, and spotty assembly. Owners reported corrosion on door bottoms, rocker panels, and fenders within a year or two, especially in northern climates. For a vehicle meant for delivery work, that was a death sentence. Electrical issues and cheap interior fittings also plagued it. There were no frills, vinyl floors, basic gauges, and little insulation. Yet somehow it still managed to feel fragile and unfinished. Small business owners saw through the gimmick immediately. Couriers and tradesmen needed reliability, space, and durability, qualities the Vega Panel Express lacked entirely. Most turned to Ford's Pinto-based courier pickup, the Chevrolet Love, or small imported vans like the Toyota Hiace and Volkswagen Type 2, all of which offered more room and stronger mechanicals. Even within GM, the Vega Panel Express looked like a mistake. The Chevy Chevette, introduced shortly after, would do the small, cheap hauler job far better. By the end of 1975, Chevrolet quietly discontinued the Panel Express, selling only a few thousand units. In the end, the 1975 Vega Panel Express failed for 3 key reasons. It was built on one of the worst platforms in GM history. The Vega's mechanical and rust issues domed it before it even began. It didn't offer real utility. Too small to haul, too weak to carry, too fragile to last. It had no clear market. It wasn't a proper van, and it wasn't an efficient compact car. It lived in a confusing middle ground no one wanted. Today, the Vega Panel Express is a rare sight, not because it's collectible, but because almost all of them rusted away. For historians of bad automotive ideas, it's a perfect example of GM's mid-70s confusion, when the company tried to make one car fit every role. The idea of a delivery Vega might have made sense in a boardroom presentation, but on the road it was a disaster. It couldn't haul, it couldn't last, and it couldn't impress. In short, the 1975 Chevrolet Vega Panel Express stands as one of the most impractical work vehicles ever made, a car that even delivery drivers refuse to deliver with. Number 5. By the early 1970s, the American auto industry was shifting. The muscle car era was fading fast under the weight of emissions regulations, insurance surcharges, and rising fuel prices. Families wanted comfort, not quarter-mile times. Buick, long seen as GM's upscale middle-class brand, decided to lean into this new trend, and the Century Luxus wagon was born. The Century name itself replaced the Skylark in 1973, and the new Colonnade-style body debuted that same year. The design featured thick roof pillars, frameless doors, and curvy, padded lines. The Luxus trim was meant to evoke European refinement. The German name suggested something exotic while still distinctly Buick. But calling a station wagon Luxus was a stretch. The Century Luxus wagon was Buick's attempt to elevate the humble family hauler. It came loaded with what GM considered luxury in the mid-1970s. Simulated wood paneling down the sides made from vinyl decals that cracked and peeled within a few years. Thick carpet and plush upholstery borrowed from Buick sedans. A padded dash and door panels because nothing says luxury like an extra half-inch of foam. Power windows, air conditioning, and AM/FM stereo, rare in wagons at the time. Underneath, however, it was pure Century, meaning it was big, heavy, and not particularly efficient. Even the luxury version of the wagon weighed nearly 4,500 pounds, powered by engines ranging from the 350 cubic inch V8 to the optional 455 cubic inch monster that delivered more torque than sense. Despite its size and engine options, the Luxus wagon wasn't quick. The early 70s were plagued by emissions restrictions and low-octane fuel, strangling performance across the board. The once mighty 455 V8 barely managed 225 horsepower, and with all that bulk to move, the car often lumbered up to highway speed rather than sprinted. Fuel economy hovered around 10 to 12 miles per gallon, which was a painful number during the 1973 oil crisis. Buyers who wanted luxury balked at the crude fuel economy, while practical families weren't eager to pay Buick prices for something that guzzled gas like a Cadillac. The problem with the Century Luxus wagon was simple: nobody knew who it was for. Families didn't want a luxury car that couldn't carry much cargo once the plush interior filled up with groceries and kids' gear. Luxury buyers didn't want to drive what was essentially a dressed-up station wagon. And the Luxus name sounded more like a marketing gimmick than a genuine high-end product. Even the sales brochures struggled to define it, calling it a family car with flair and a luxury automobile with utility. In reality, it was a compromise that satisfied neither group. Like many GM products of the early 1970s, the Luxus wagon suffered from quality issues. Body panels often rusted prematurely, and the complicated emission systems caused drivability problems. The heavy car put stress on brakes, transmissions, and suspensions, leading to frequent repair bills. Owners loved the comfort, but not the upkeep, especially when it was time to replace the wagon's long strips of fake wood paneling, which faded quickly in sunlight. Sales were mediocre. The Luxus wagon never caught on, and Buick quietly dropped the Luxus branding after just a few years. By 1975, it was clear that luxury station wagons were a contradiction in terms. Families moved toward more efficient compact wagons, while true luxury buyers gravitated to full-size sedans or personal coupes. In hindsight, the Century Luxus wagon was an experiment in confused identity, a car that tried to make family hauling glamorous but ended up looking like a middle manager's midlife crisis. Today, the 1973 Buick Century Luxus wagon is mostly forgotten, overshadowed by both the flashier Riviera and the more practical LeSabre wagons. A few survive as curiosities, often admired for their retro charm and fake wood nostalgia. But in its own way, it represents a fascinating moment in automotive history, when Detroit still believed it could sell anything by adding vinyl trim, chrome accents, and a European-sounding name. Number 4. The Ford Probe was introduced in 1989 as part of Ford's attempt to appeal to younger buyers and compete in the growing sport compact market. But behind its sleek, aerodynamic exterior was a car that nearly destroyed one of America's most cherished automotive legacies, the Mustang. Ford's original plan was bold and, to hardcore Mustang fans, almost sacrilegious. The Probe was initially intended to replace the Mustang entirely. By the mid-1980s, the Mustang was aging. Its Fox platform roots were showing, sales were stagnating, and Ford feared it was losing relevance against smaller, sportier imports like the Toyota Celica and Honda Prelude. The Probe was designed in collaboration with Mazda, who provided the platform, engines, and suspension design to be a front-wheel drive sport coupe. Ford envisioned a Mustang successor that would be lighter, more fuel-efficient, and tuned for handling rather than straight-line power. It was a radical departure from the Mustang formula. Front-wheel drive instead of rear-wheel drive. Smaller, lower displacement engines instead of V8 muscle. Aerodynamic hatchback body instead of long hood coupe. The idea was to modernize the Mustang for the 1990s, but the Mustang faithful were not ready to forgive such a betrayal. The 1989 Probe looked radically different from anything Ford had built. Aerodynamic wedge shape with pop-up headlights. Flush bumpers and smooth body panels for lower drag. Low-slung two-door hatchback profile. Sporty interior with simple gauges and snug seats. It was undeniably sleek and futuristic, but many critics considered it too Japanese-looking and too far removed from the Mustang's muscle car heritage. To die-hard fans, it seemed more like a Mazda RX-7 sibling than a true American sports car. The Probe offered modest performance that reflected its sport compact ambitions rather than muscle car roots. 2.2-liter inline-4, 110 to 130 horsepower, base engine, 2.5-liter V6, 145 to 164 horsepower, GT version with better acceleration, front-wheel drive, manual and automatic transmissions available. Acceleration was adequate for commuting, but the Probe lacked the roar, torque, and visceral feel Mustang fans expected. The GT version was sporty enough to satisfy some enthusiasts, but it could never replicate the V8 thrill of a Mustang GT or Cobra. When Ford announced that the Probe was meant to replace the Mustang, the response was immediate and furious. Mustang owners felt betrayed. Muscle car purists saw the Probe as a lightweight, watered-down FWD imposter. Automotive journalists called it a Mazda in Ford clothing. Mustang's image as an American icon seemed under threat. Faced with backlash, Ford quickly abandoned the idea of retiring the Mustang, and the Probe became a separate, lower-tier sport coupe in the lineup. The Probe sold reasonably well, especially among younger buyers who appreciated styling, fuel economy, and Japanese-like handling. But it never captured Mustang buyers, who wanted V8 power, rear-wheel drive, and American muscle. It became a cautionary tale, a car that could have killed the Mustang's image, but instead coexisted awkwardly as a niche sport coupe. The Ford Probe is remembered as a bold experiment that almost destroyed a legend, a sporty but underpowered front-wheel drive coupe, an example of bad timing and misreading the market. Interestingly, many automotive historians now see the Probe as a well-designed car in its own right, but one burdened by the weight of Mustang comparisons and public expectation. Styling influenced Ford's later sport coupes. It kept younger buyers in the brand, preventing them from defecting to imports. It inadvertently reinforced the Mustang's cult status by showing that nothing could truly replace it. Quick specs: 1989 Ford Probe GT. Engine 2.5-liter V6. Power 164 horsepower. Torque 160 pound-feet. Transmission 5-speed manual or 3-speed automatic. 0 to 60 miles per hour, some 8.5 to 9.5 seconds. Top speed, some 125 miles per hour. Weight, some 2,600 pounds. Drive layout, front-wheel drive. In summary, the 1989 Ford Probe represents one of the most audacious what-ifs in American automotive history. A car that almost replaced the Mustang with a futuristic front-wheel drive hatchback. It was sleek, competent, and efficient, but it lacked soul, power, and identity. The public outrage forced Ford to keep the Mustang alive, and the Probe survived as a footnote in the story of America's most iconic pony car. In essence, the probe shows how even a technically competent car can fail if it betrays heritage and customer expectations. Number 3. The Lincoln Versailles was introduced in 1977 for the 1978 model year as Lincoln's answer to Cadillac's Seville, Cadillac's new compact luxury sedan. At the time, Cadillac had found a niche. Wealthy buyers wanted a smaller, more fuel-efficient luxury car without sacrificing style or comfort. Ford saw an opportunity, but executed it poorly. The Versailles was essentially a rebranded Ford Granada. Same body, same platform, same mechanicals. Lincoln's hope was that chrome trim, fancier upholstery, and a new grille would fool buyers into thinking they were getting a high-end, European-inspired luxury sedan. The Versailles had some cosmetic upgrades over the Granada. Quad rectangular headlights, uncommon at the time, extra chrome on the bumpers, grille and window surrounds, standard leather seats, velour options, and thick carpeting, optional digital clock, and luxury-oriented interior details. Despite these touches, the car's proportions, lines, and overall aesthetic were indistinguishable from a Granada unless someone looked closely. Even the interior had a familiar layout, padded dashboard, simple controls, and minimal technology. It was luxury in name, not in feel. Under the hood, the Versailles was largely unchanged from its Ford Granada cousin. Engines: 302 cubic inch V8 standard, optional 351 or 400 V8s. Transmission: 3-speed automatic. Drive layout: rear-wheel drive. Suspension: standard Ford suspension, tuned for comfort but not performance. The car had no handling advantages, no unique ride features, and certainly no innovation that justified the Lincoln badge or its higher price. Acceleration and ride were adequate, but nothing to write home about, especially when compared to Cadillac's Seville, which had independent rear suspension and a more refined feel. The Versailles carried a sticker price around $13,000, which placed it close to real luxury cars like the Cadillac Seville and even some full-size Lincoln Continental trims. But buyers quickly realized they were paying thousands more for a Granada with chrome and leather. The result? Public perception was brutal. Automotive journalists called it a Ford in a tuxedo, badge engineered beyond reason, and the Cadillac Seville's poor cousin. Many critics pointed out that it ruined Lincoln's prestige rather than enhanced it. Initially, Ford hoped prestige-conscious buyers would appreciate the Versailles' European-inspired design cues and small footprint. Some buyers did bite, but most saw through the marketing. Sales were slow compared to Cadillac Seville. Many loyal Lincoln buyers refused to touch a car so clearly derivative. Within a few years, Lincoln quietly discontinued the Versailles, leaving it as a footnote in automotive history. The 1978 Lincoln Versailles remains infamous as a cautionary tale in badge engineering. Simply adding chrome, leather, and minor styling changes cannot transform a mainstream car into a luxury car. Consumers quickly detect cosmetic-only upgrades, and brand trust can be damaged. Even in an era of rising fuel prices and compact luxury demand, substance mattered more than surface appearances. The Versailles damaged Lincoln's credibility and became the poster child for fake luxury in the American market. Quick specs: 1978 Lincoln Versailles. Platform: Ford Granada, Fox-based rear-wheel drive. Engines: 302 V8 standard, 351 or 400 V8s optional. Transmission: 3-speed automatic. Curb weight: circa 3,400 pounds. 0 to 60 miles per gallon, circa 10 to 12 seconds depending on engine. Price: circa $13,000. Unique features: quad rectangular headlights, leather interior, thick carpeting, optional digital clock. In summary, the 1978 Lincoln Versailles is remembered not for luxury, performance, or innovation, but for the audacity of its marketing. Ford tried to compete with Cadillac using cosmetics and badges alone, and the car's reception proved that American buyers could see through pretension. It serves as a perfect lesson in automotive branding. No amount of chrome can disguise a mediocre car. Number 2. The Plymouth Cricket was introduced in 1971 as Chrysler's attempt to enter the growing American subcompact market, which was increasingly dominated by imports like the Volkswagen Beetle, Datsun 510, and Toyota Corolla. Chrysler didn't want to invest in a brand new American design, so they opted for an easy shortcut. They rebadged the British Hillman Avenger, a car built by the Rootes Group in the UK. The result was a car that was technically foreign, mechanically unreliable, and completely unsuited to American tastes. The Hillman Avenger was a competent small car in Europe, designed for narrow roads and light traffic. Chrysler hoped that Americans would appreciate a cheap, fuel-efficient subcompact, especially with rising fuel prices. Chrysler rebranded it as the Plymouth Cricket. Chrysler had also planned Dodge Colt versions, slapping an American badge on the front grille, slightly modified taillights, and a few trim changes. But the Cricket name proved eerily accurate. Tiny, squeaky, and high-pitched, it immediately suggested a car that was annoying and fragile rather than fun and efficient. The Cricket was small even by 1970s subcompact standards. Length, around 155 inches. Wheelbase, 94 inches. Weight, around 1,900 to 2,000 pounds. Inside, it offered seating for 4, but legroom was cramped, especially in the rear. Materials were cheap, and the interior often felt plasticky and rickety. Vinyl seats and minimal padding made long drives uncomfortable. Dashboard instruments were functional but Spartan, with few amenities beyond the basics. It looked cute in photos, but in reality, it felt cheap and disposable. Here's where the Cricket truly failed. Engines, 1.3-liter or 1.5-liter inline-4, producing 60 to 70 horsepower. Transmission, 4-speed manual, optional 3-speed automatic. Drive layout, rear-wheel drive. The engines were underpowered, leaving the Cricket slow on highways and struggling on inclines. Passing maneuvers required careful planning, and highway cruising was noisy and strained. But the worst problems were electrical and mechanical reliability. Alternators and starters failed frequently. Wiring harnesses were prone to corrosion. Suspension and steering parts wore out quickly. Even though it was tiny and light, the car felt fragile and unreliable, earning it a reputation as a mechanical headache rather than a dependable commuter car. American buyers were unimpressed. The Cricket faced a double challenge. Imports already dominated the subcompact segment, offering superior reliability, Volkswagen Beetle, or driving dynamics, Datsun Toyota. American consumers expected value, not headaches. The Cricket's frequent repairs, noisy cabin, and lack of performance made it a tough sell. Sales were dismal. Dealers complained, customers complained, and automotive journalists mocked it as tiny, squeaky, and easily squashed, which, ironically, perfectly matched its name. The Plymouth Cricket is now remembered as one of Chrysler's most ill-conceived attempts to import foreign cars for the U.S. market. It damaged Chrysler's reputation in the subcompact segment, disappeared quickly, replaced by more competent Japanese imports rebadged for Chrysler, like the Dodge Colt later on, became a cautionary tale of importing a car without adapting it for local conditions. Few survive today, and those that do are mostly collector curiosities prized for their rarity rather than performance or comfort. Quick specs: 1971 Plymouth Cricket. Engine, 1.3-liter or 1.5-liter inline-4. Power, 60 to 70 horsepower. Transmission, 4-speed manual, 3-speed automatic optional. Drive layout, rear-wheel drive. Curb weight, around 1,900 to 2,000 pounds. 0 to 60 miles per hour, around 15 to 17 seconds. Fuel economy, around 25 to 30 miles per gallon. Length, 155 inches. Seating, 4 passengers. In summary, The 1971 Plymouth Cricket wasn't just a small car, it was a symbol of Chrysler's desperation in the early 1970s. By importing a British Hillman Avenger and slapping an American badge on it, Chrysler created a vehicle that was weak, fragile, and almost impossible to recommend. It earned its name literally and figuratively, a tiny, noisy, and easily crushed cricket in the American automotive landscape.
Number 1. The Chevrolet El Camino has always been a hybrid, part car, part pickup truck. Introduced in 1959 as a car-based utility vehicle, the El Camino was meant for farmers, tradesmen, and small business owners who wanted car-like comfort with truck-like utility. By the mid-1970s, however, the market had shifted, and the El Camino SS had become a muscle car-style version of a concept that was already confusing by design. By 1977, the El Camino was too heavy, too bloated, and too impractical to fulfill either role effectively. The 1977 El Camino was built on GM's GM A-body platform, shared with the Chevelle. Its styling was aggressive. Long hood, short deck proportions reminiscent of muscle coupes. Optional SS trim with bold stripes, bucket seats, and sportier wheels. A bed that looked like a pickup but was shallow and narrow compared to full-size trucks. The El Camino SS looked like a car that had tried to be a truck for show, not work. Its bed could carry some cargo, but the rear suspension and ride comfort were designed more for performance than hauling. The SS badge promised performance, but by 1977, emissions regulations and rising insurance rates had begun to gut American muscle cars. Engine options included small block 350 V8, around 165 to 175 horsepower after emissions tuning. Optional 396 or 402 V8s, around 200 to 220 horsepower, also emission strangled. 3-speed or 4-speed manual, 3-speed automatic optional. Rear-wheel drive. Even the most powerful engines struggled with the El Camino's 3,500 to 3,800 pounds curb weight. 0 to 60 miles times were slow compared to the early 70s models, and fuel economy was abysmal, often under 12 mpg for the big V8s. What had once been a lightweight, nimble muscle pickup had become a bloated compromise, neither fast enough for enthusiasts nor efficient enough for daily work. The El Camino was never a serious work truck, but the 1977 model pushed that irony further. The bed was too shallow to carry heavy loads comfortably. Rear suspension was tuned for comfort and handling rather than payload. Gas mileage was terrible, especially with V8 engines. Insurance costs for the SS version were high, making it impractical for younger buyers. Essentially, it became a showpiece muscle pickup, a statement car for people who wanted style more than utility. By the late 70s, the El Camino SS was competing with Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, pure muscle car appeal; Chevy C10 pickup, real workhorse capability; Ford Ranchero, similar car-truck hybrid, but the late 70s model also suffered from the same bloating problem. The El Camino SS satisfied neither the truck crowd nor true muscle car enthusiasts. Its hybrid identity, once unique, now seemed awkward and confused. The 1977 El Camino represents a turning point for the car-truck hybrid. It shows how emissions and insurance regulations eroded the muscle car dream. It highlights the challenges of maintaining a niche vehicle in a changing market. Despite flaws, it remains iconic for its styling, as collectors still appreciate its bold stripes, bucket seats, and classic SS trim. Yet, for the everyday driver in 1977, it was slow, heavy, expensive to fuel, and barely functional as a truck. The El Camino's original utility was lost in the quest to keep the SS mystique alive. Quick specs: 1977 Chevrolet El Camino SS. Platform: GM A-body, shared with Chevelle. Engine options: 350, 396, 402 V8s.
Horsepower, around 165 to 220 horsepower. Transmission, 3-speed or 4-speed manual, 3-speed automatic optional. Curb weight, 3,500 to 3,800 pounds. 0 to 60 miles, 8 to 10 seconds, depending on engine. Top speed, around 110 to 120 miles. Fuel economy, 10 to 15 mpg, V8 engines. Drive layout, rear-wheel drive. Bed capacity, around 1,200 pounds, max, light-duty use only. In summary, the 1977 Chevrolet El Camino SS was a car that tried to be muscle, style, and utility all at once, but ended up too heavy, slow, and impractical to succeed in any role. It remains an icon for collectors, but it's also a cautionary tale about how compromising practicality for style can turn a unique concept into a confused, bloated relic.